Alright everyone, settle in for tonight's exploration. We're veering off the well-trodden path of heroic sagas and stepping into something a touch more unvarnished. Prepare for a deep dive not into the celebrated naval victories or the grand adventures of sea captains, but into the forgotten toil and the everyday agony of life for a galley slave in the 16th century Mediterranean. That romantic image of oar-powered warships cutting through azure waters, flags snapping bravely in the breeze. Well, the unvarnished truth for those chained to the benches was often a far cry, a relentless torment of muscle-shredding labor, rampant disease, and crushing despair, and frankly your modern comforts would feel like a distant, unimaginable paradise. So, find your coziest spot. If you appreciate a journey into the raw, unfiltered past, a like on the video would be fantastic, and do consider subscribing for more of these historical reality checks. As always, I'm curious to know where you're joining us from tonight. Drop a comment with your location and time. It's always a highlight seeing our global community. Okay? Perhaps dim those lights, let a soft ambient sound fill the room, and let's embark on tonight's rather sobering journey together. Your world is a cramped, reeking hell, measured in the span of the oar and the length of your chain. You don't remember how you got here, perhaps captured in a coastal raid, a prisoner of war or condemned by a harsh justice system. The details are blurred by hunger, exhaustion, and the ceaseless rhythmic agony of rowing. What you know is the unyielding wood of the bench beneath you, the galling iron of the shackle on your ankle, and the looming presence of the overseers who patrol the central gangway, their shadows a constant source of dread. The sea air, so often praised in song and story, rarely reaches you untainted by the stench of sweat, vomit, excrement, and bilge water. The oar is your cruel master, your constant companion. It's a monstrous length of timber, heavy and unwieldy, demanding the coordinated effort of you and the 2, 3, or even 4 other wretches chained to the same bench. Each stroke is a symphony of torment, the strain on your back, the fire in your shoulders, the raw, bleeding skin on your hand. You pull and pull and pull for hours that stretch into eternity, driven by the rhythm beaten out on a drum or the sharp commands barked from above. There is no respite, save for the briefest pauses to gulp fetid water or choke down a mouthful of execrable food. The rhythm is everything. Miss a stroke, falter in your timing, and you risk the ire of the men beside you, whose own bodies will absorb the shock of your failure, and worse, the immediate brutal attention of an overseer. Though direct depictions of their tools of enforcement are best left to the imagination, the atmosphere of fear they cultivate is palpable. A dropped oar or a moment of weakness can invite a response designed to make an example of you, ensuring the relentless machine of the galley continues to function. The silent, shared terror keeps the oars moving, even when your body screams for release. Your skin is a roadmap of suffering. Salt sores, rubbed raw by the friction of your rags, and the constant dampness, pepper your body. Your hands are calloused to the point of woodenness, yet they still crack and bleed, the wounds festering in the filth. The sun, when you are exposed on deck during rare moments, beats down mercilessly, baking your unwashed skin, while below deck, the damp chill seeps into your bones. You are a canvas of 1,000 minor agonies, each one a testament to your unceasing torment. The stench is an assault that never ends. The air in the rowing well is thick, a miasma of human effluvia, with scores, sometimes hundreds of men packed into the confined space, forced to relieve themselves where they sit. The conditions are beyond foul. Add to this the stale food, the bilge water sloshing below, the vomit of the seasick, and the ever-present odor of unwashed, diseased bodies, and you have an atmosphere that would gag a vulture. You learn to breathe shallowly, to almost forget what clean air smells like. Food is a mockery of sustenance. A typical ration might be a few handfuls of hard, often weevil-infested ship's biscuit, and a ladle of watery vegetable slop, perhaps with a few beans, or chickpeas if you are fortunate. Meat is a forgotten dream. The biscuit must be soaked in water to be chewable, assuming your teeth haven't already rotted from scurvy or malnutrition. You eat mechanically, without pleasure, driven only by the desperate need to fuel your laboring body for another few hours of hell. Water is more precious than gold, and just as scarce. It's often stored in wooden casks, quickly becoming slimy and tasting of mold and rot. Each man receives a meager daily ration, barely enough to ward off the worst of dehydration under the Mediterranean sun or in the stifling heat of the rowing deck. You crave it, dream of it, and the sight of the water-bearer is a moment of desperate anticipation, often followed by the disappointment of its foul taste and insufficient quantity. Sharing is unthinkable. Every drop is for survival. Sleep is a fugitive, rarely captured for long. When the galley is anchored, or when a shift system allows, you might slump over your oar or collapse onto the hard bench, still chained, still surrounded by the groans and smells of your fellow sufferers. The vermin, rats and lice, ensure your rest is never peaceful. Rats scurry over your body, bold and unafraid, while lice feast on your blood, their bites leaving you in a torment of itching. You awaken as tired as when you closed your eyes. Disease is rampant, a scythe that cuts through the ranks of the condemned. Scurvy, dysentery, typhus, fevers of unknown origin, they thrive in the squalor and malnourishment. A sick slave is a liability. If you fall ill, you might be offered rudimentary, often useless, treatment, or simply be left to die, your body unceremoniously dumped overboard to make space for a healthier replacement. You see men around you fading, their eyes hollow, their skin sallow, and you know your own turn could come at any moment. The overseers, often brutalized men themselves, or mercenaries hardened by a life of violence, rule through an ever-present atmosphere of menace. They patrol the central gangway, their eyes scanning for any sign of weakness, any lapse in the rhythm. While we avoid detailing their methods, the fear they instill is a powerful motivator. Their shouted commands, the crack of some unseen instrument of persuasion, the sight of a fellow slave being dragged away, these are enough to keep your muscles straining at the oar long past the point of exhaustion. The cramped conditions are a torture in themselves. You are packed so tightly onto the benches that movement is severely restricted, your limbs ache from the unnatural posture, your back is permanently bowed. There is no privacy, no personal space, no moment when you are not in jarring, uncomfortable contact with the sweaty, stinking bodies of your benchmates. This forced proximity breeds tension, resentment, and sometimes desperate, futile acts of aggression. The soundscape of the galley is a cacophony of misery, the endless creak and groan of the timbers, the rhythmic splash and thud of the oars in the water, the shouted orders of the officers, the overseers' harsh cries, the rhythmic beat of the drum or hammer setting the stroke, the coughing and groaning of sick and dying men, the clank of chains, and beneath it all, your own ragged breathing, and the frantic thumping of your heart. Silence is unknown, a forgotten luxury. When a storm hits, your terror is magnified. The galley, a long, slender vessel, is tossed about by the waves like a toy. Water crashes over the sides, drenching you, chilling you to the bone. The oars become almost impossible to manage, threatening to snap or to pull you from your bed. The ship groans and shudders, and you pray to whatever gods you remember that it doesn't break apart and send you, still chained, to a watery grave. The officers shout, the overseers become more agitated, and your misery reaches a new peak. The threat of battle is another constant shadow. Galleys are warships, and conflict is frequent. The approach of an enemy vessel is signaled by a change in the rhythm, a new urgency in the commands. You might hear the distant thud of cannons, the crack of musketry. You are expected to row harder, faster, to maneuver the ship into position, or to flee. You are a target, chained and helpless, with no way to defend yourself, no hope of escape, if your ship is sunk or boarded. If your galley is victorious, and captures enemy slaves, you might witness their despair, a grim reflection of your own. If your ship is defeated, your fate is uncertain, but likely no better, a change of masters perhaps, but the same bench, the same oar, the same unyielding misery. For a galley slave, there is rarely such a thing as liberation through battle, only the continuation of servitude under a different flag. The sun, when it beats down on the open deck, if you are ever allowed above, is a cruel tormentor. It reflects off the water, blinding you, and bakes your exposed skin. There is little shade. Combined with the exertion of rowing, it leads to heatstroke and agonizing thirst. You long for the relative coolness of the rowing well, despite its stench and gloom, a testament to the impossible choices of your suffering. Hygiene is a concept so alien as to be laughable. Washing is impossible. Your clothes, if you can call the rags you wear clothes, are stiff with dried sweat, filth, and vermin. Your hair is matted, your body encrusted with grime. The simplest cut or abrasion can swiftly turn into a festering, life-threatening infection. You live in a state of perpetual, unavoidable squalor. The psychological toll is as devastating as the physical. The hopelessness, the endless monotony, the constant pain and fear, the utter lack of control over your own existence. It grinds down your spirit. Some men succumb to madness, their minds shattering under the strain. Others retreat into a shell of apathy, their eyes vacant, their movements purely mechanical. Survival often means a kind of spiritual death. You develop a sixth sense for the moods of the overseers, the subtle shifts in the ship's routine that might signal danger or a change in conditions. You learn to read the expressions of your fellow slaves, to anticipate their needs or their breaking point. This hyper-awareness is a survival mechanism, a way to navigate the treacherous currents of your daily existence, but it keeps your nerves perpetually frayed. The briefest moments of respite are treasured beyond measure. A pause in rowing when the wind fills the sails, a slightly less putrid ladle of water, a moment when the overseer's attention is elsewhere. These are fleeting, insignificant to an outsider, but to you they are tiny islands of relief in an ocean of suffering. You cling to them, hoard them in your memory. The chains are a constant reminder of your bondage. They chafe your ankles raw, clank with every movement, and bind you to your bench, to your oar, to your fate. You dream of being without them, of stretching your limbs, of walking freely. But the reality is the cold, unyielding iron, a symbol of your complete and utter subjugation. It is a weight on your body and your soul. Sometimes other slaves on your bench are your countrymen, sharing a language. This can be a small comfort, a fragile bond, in the midst of shared degradation. You might exchange whispered words, share a look of understanding, but often your benchmates are strangers, foreigners, enemies in a previous life, now united only by the oar and the chain. Mistrust and hostility can simmer just beneath the surface. The sight of land can be both a hope and a torment. It might mean a brief stop for fresh water or supplies, a temporary change from the ceaseless motion of the sea. But it also reminds you of the world you have lost, the freedom that is just beyond your reach. You watch the shore recede with a fresh wave of despair, knowing your prison remains with you. When an oar breaks, it is a moment of crisis. The rhythm is shattered, the ship's momentum falters. The overseers react with fury, and the unfortunate slaves on that bench bear the brunt of it. Replacing a massive oar in the cramped conditions, under duress, is a difficult and dangerous task, often accompanied by an escalation of brutality from those in charge. The hierarchy among the slaves themselves is often based on brute strength or a coward's subservience that finds favor with the overseers. Weaker men are further victimized, their meager rations stolen, their small comforts usurped. There is little solidarity when survival itself is a daily struggle, and every man is ultimately alone in his suffering. This internal strife is just another layer of the hell you endure. The sheer monotony of the labor is mind-numbing. Pull, recover, hour after hour, day after day, week after week. Your mind goes blank or replays an endless loop of painful memories. You become an automaton, a cog in the great creaking machine of the galley. This mental erosion is as damaging as the physical toll. If you are fortunate enough to be on a galley that uses a sail when the wind is favorable, the brief cessation of rowing is a taste of paradise. The command to ship oars brings a collective sigh of relief, a momentary easing of tortured muscle. But these moments are often short-lived, dependent on the caprice of the wind, and the oars are always there, waiting. The air below decks, where you are chained, is often so foul and depleted of oxygen that men faint at their oars. The overseers might douse them with seawater to revive them, or simply drag them aside if they are too weak to continue, their place quickly taken by another. Human life is cheap, easily expendable when there are always more bodies to feed. The insatiable hunger of the oar. Consider the moments when a high-ranking officer or captain walks the deck above. You might catch a glimpse of fine clothes, hear laughter or music, sounds from a different universe. It's a stark reminder of the chasm that separates your existence from theirs, their comfort built directly upon your unceasing agony. The injustice is a bitter pill, swallowed daily. The nights can bring a different kind of terror. In the darkness, every creak of the ship, every splash of water, can sound like an approaching enemy, or the onset of a storm. Your imagination, fueled by exhaustion and fear, can conjure all sorts of horror. Sleep, when it comes, is often shallow and plagued by nightmares of drowning, of endless rowing, of pursuits without end. The concept of a future is almost impossible to grasp. Your world is circumscribed by the immediate demands of the oar, the next meager meal, the avoidance of the overseer's attention. To think of weeks, months, or years of this existence is to invite madness. You learn to take each stroke, each hour as it comes, a grim philosophy of radical, forced presentism. The feel of the rough, splintered wood of the oar handle in your raw hands is a constant. You try to vary your grip, to find some way to lessen the friction, but it's a losing battle. Your palms are a mass of blisters, calluses, and open sores. The pain is a dull, throbbing background to every other sensation. Sometimes, the oar feels like an extension of your own tortured body. The salt from the sea spray, and your own sweat encrusts your skin, your rag. It stings your eyes, irritates your sores, and leaves you feeling perpetually grimy and uncomfortable. There is no escape from it. It is a constant reminder of your maritime prison, a gritty film that coats your entire miserable existence. When slaves die, their bodies are typically disposed of, with little ceremony. They are unchained from the bench, and unceremoniously cast overboard, often without a prayer or a backward glance. You watch this, knowing that the same fate likely awaits you. It reinforces the dehumanizing nature of your servitude, the perception that you are less than human, mere fuel for the ship. The rare sight of dolphins playing in the bow wave, or seabirds soaring overhead, can be a moment of strange, painful beauty. It's a glimpse of a free, natural world that is utterly alien to your current reality. It might offer a fleeting moment of distraction, but it also underscores the profound loss of your own liberty, the stark contrast between their effortless grace and your chained agony. The ship itself becomes your entire universe. Its creaks and groans are as familiar as your own heartbeat. You know every plank, every stain on the bench, every variation in the rhythm of the oars. This confined world, with its fixed routines of suffering, is all you have. The world beyond the gunwales is a distant, almost mythical place. The psychological games played by some overseers, the subtle ways they can inflict torment without overt violence, a withheld ration of water, an extra hour of rowing, a sneering comment, can be as damaging as any physical blow. They understand the power of fear, of uncertainty, of grinding down a man's spirit through 1,000 small cruelties. These are the unseen, insidious torment. If you were a skilled artisan, or had some other useful trade before your enslavement, that knowledge is now useless, a mocking reminder of a life that no longer exists. Here, your only value is the strength of your back and arms, your ability to endure the unendurable. All other aspects of your former identity are stripped away, scoured clean by the harsh demands of the oar. The bonds you form with your immediate benchmates are complex. They are your fellow sufferers, the only ones who can truly understand your plight. You might share a whispered word, a warning glance, a moment of silent solidarity, but they are also your competitors for meager resources, and their weakness can impact your own ability to keep the rhythm, potentially drawing unwanted attention. Trust is a rare and fragile commodity. The constant, jarring motion of the galley, even in relatively calm seas, contributes to your misery. It makes sleep difficult, eating a messy affair, and every movement an effort. Seasickness is common, especially among new slaves, adding another layer of wretchedness to their already unbearable conditions. Your body never truly acclimates, it merely endures. The only change in routine might be dictated by the strategic needs of the fleet. Long periods at sea, pursuing an enemy or blockading a port, mean even more relentless rowing, more depleted rations. Brief periods in port might offer a change of scenery, but rarely a change in your condition. You might be tasked with other forms of drudgery, cleaning the ship, loading supplies, but always under guard, always in chains. The different nationalities and languages among the slaves can create further divisions and misunderstanding. Communication is often through gestures, or a pidgin language developed in the galleys. This lack of shared understanding can exacerbate tensions, and make coordinated resistance, even on the smallest scale, almost impossible. You are a Tower of Babel chained to a common misery. The hope of escape is a dangerous ember that some try to keep alive, while others extinguish it as an unbearable torment. Successful escapes are exceedingly rare, almost legendary. The price of failure is unthinkable. Most resign themselves to their fate, finding what solace they can in the grim routine, in the fleeting moments of oblivion offered by exhaustion or sleep. The clothing provided, if any, is minimal and of the coarsest material, a loincloth, a ragged tunic. It offers little protection from the elements or the friction of the bench and oar. Often slaves row almost naked, their body exposed to the sun, the spray and the critical gaze of their captors. This lack of covering is another layer of dehumanization. You mark time by the changing shifts of the overseers, by the quality of the light filtering into the rowing well, by the ache in your joints. Days blur into weeks, weeks into months. The memory of your former life, of freedom, begins to fade, replaced by the stark, brutal reality of your present. You become a creature of the oar, your identity defined by your suffering. The utter indifference of your captors to your suffering is perhaps the cruelest cut of all. To them, you are not a human being with thoughts, feelings and a soul, but a replaceable part of the ship's propulsion system, like a sail or a rudder, only animate. This casual dehumanization is a constant silent assault on your spirit. Occasionally a ship's chaplain or a visiting friar might offer words of religious comfort, speaking of an afterlife, of divine justice. For some, these words offer a flicker of solace.
For others, they are a hollow mockery in the face of such relentless man-made hell. Your faith, if you had any, is sorely tested by the daily evidence of man's inhumanity to man. The smell of gunpowder during a battle, the screams of the wounded, the splintering of wood as cannonballs strike. These are terrifying additions to your already sensory overloaded world. You row blindly, deafened by the din choking on the acrid smoke, knowing that your survival depends on the skill and luck of men you cannot see, men who care nothing for your individual fate. The transition from a new slave, still raw with the shock and terror of capture, to a seasoned, hardened rower is a grim one. It involves the death of hope, the acceptance of an unbearable reality, and the development of a calloused indifference to your own suffering and that of others. This is the price of long-term survival in the floating hell of the galley. If the galley is beached for careening, cleaning the hull of barnacles and weed, you might be forced to work ashore, still in chains under the hot sun. This change of labor is no relief, merely a different form of torment. The brief contact with solid earth only serves to remind you of the vast ocean of your captivity. The moments before dawn, when the first hints of light appear and the command to prepare to row is given, are often the worst. The brief, inadequate rest is over, and another day of agonizing labor stretches before you, as predictable and as inescapable as the rising of the sun. You steel yourself, your muscles already aching in anticipation. The taste of your own sweat and blood is a familiar one. Sweat pours from you during the endless labor, stinging your eyes and wounds. Blood seeps from your raw hands, from sores on your body. These are the bitter flavors of your existence, a constant internal reminder of the price your body pays for each stroke of the oar. Looking at the calloused, deformed hands of older slaves, men who have endured this life for years, is like looking at a terrifying prophecy of your own future, should you be unfortunate enough to survive that long. Their bodies are broken, their spirits seemingly extinguished. It is a vision of what this life grinds a man down to. Ultimately you are a ghost in your own life, a spectre chained to an oar, existing in a twilight world of pain, filth, and despair. The vibrant sunlit world of the Mediterranean passes by unheeded, a cruel mockery of the beauty and freedom that has been stolen from you. Your only reality is the bench, the oar, the chain, and the endless agonizing rhythm of the stroke.
Imagine a vast, seemingly endless expanse of sun-scorched desert, the wind sculpting dunes into ever-shifting landscapes. Across this formidable terrain, a long line of heavily laden Bactrian camels plods patiently onward, their bells a rhythmic counterpoint to the silence of the wilderness. These are the ships of the desert, a caravan traversing one of the many arduous arteries of a network that once pulsed with the lifeblood of intercontinental exchange. This was the Silk Road, a name coined only in the 19th century, yet an ancient reality that for over 1,500 years bridged the immense distances between East and West, a conduit not only for precious silks and exotic goods, but for profound ideas, transformative technologies, vibrant artistic styles, and deeply held religious beliefs. It was not a single road, but an intricate web of trails, oases, and bustling emporia, a testament to human resilience, commercial acumen, and the enduring desire for connection across formidable geographical and cultural divides. The origins of these transcontinental connections were ancient, predating the formal opening, often associated with the 2nd century BCE. Nomadic peoples of the Eurasian steppes had long facilitated limited exchanges of goods and ideas across the vast interior. The Persian Empire, with its royal road stretching from Susa to Sardis, demonstrated the feasibility of organized long-distance communication and transport. Early interactions between the Hellenistic world, following Alexander the Great's campaigns, and the cultures of Central Asia and India also laid some groundwork. But the catalyst that truly ignited what we now recognize as the Silk Road was the burgeoning power of two great empires at opposite ends of the Eurasian landmass, the Han dynasty in the east and the Roman Empire in the west. Around 1308 BCE, the Han Emperor Wu dispatched his envoy Zhangchan on a diplomatic mission westward, seeking allies against the nomadic Xiongnu Confederation. Though his mission was fraught with peril and long years of captivity, Zhangchan eventually returned with invaluable knowledge of the sophisticated civilizations and desirable goods of Central Asia, particularly the powerful horses of the Fergana Valley, crucial for the Han military. His report spurred further Han expeditions and military campaigns, pushing Chinese influence westward into the Tarim Basin, securing oases, and establishing garrisons. This westward reach by the Han, driven initially by strategic concerns, effectively opened the eastern end of the trade route. Simultaneously in the west, The Roman Empire, with its expanding wealth and insatiable appetite for luxuries, developed a fervent desire for one particular commodity that epitomized Oriental exoticism and opulence. This lustrous fabric, its production a closely guarded secret in its land of origin, became a powerful economic engine driving westward trade. The Silk Road was never a single, paved highway, but a shifting network of caravan tracks that adapted to political conditions, climate, and the availability of water and fodder. It comprised several main branches. A northern road skirted the Tian Shan Mountains, passing through important oasis cities like Turfan and Kashgar before crossing the formidable Pamir Mountain. The southern road ran along the northern edge of the Kunlun Mountains, south of the terrifying Taklamakan Desert, whose name ominously means you go in, you do not come out, linking oases such as Khotan and Yarkand. These roads converged in Central Asia, in regions like Sogdiana and Bactria, before branching out again towards Persia, Mesopotamia, the Levant, and ultimately, the Mediterranean ports from which goods reached Rome. The journey was immensely challenging, traversing some of the world's most inhospitable terrains, scorching deserts, towering mountain ranges with treacherous passes, and vast, unpopulated steppes. Travelers faced extreme climates, from searing heat to bitter cold, the constant threat of bandits, and the perils of illness and exhaustion. The lifeblood of this network was the oasis city. These verdant pockets of civilization, nourished by meltwater from distant mountains, were vital staging posts, providing caravans with water, food, shelter and fresh pack animals. Cities like Merv in modern Turkmenistan, Samarkand and Bukhara, in Sogdiana, modern Uzbekistan, Balkh, in Bactria, modern Afghanistan, Kashgar, Khotan, and Turfan in the Tarim Basin, and Dunhuang on the eastern edge of the Taklamakan, became vibrant, cosmopolitan hubs. Here merchants from diverse backgrounds met, bartered their goods, exchanged news, and rested before embarking on the next arduous leg of their journey. These oases were not just commercial centers, they became melting pots of cultures, languages, and religions, their bazaars filled with a bewildering array of peoples and products. The merchants who plied these routes were a diverse and hardy breed. Among the most prominent and successful were the Sogdians, an Iranian people, hailing from the region around Samarkand and Bukhara. Renowned for their commercial skills, linguistic abilities and extensive networks, Sogdian traders dominated many sections of the Silk Road for centuries, establishing communities and trading posts, from Persia to the frontiers of China. Persians too played a crucial role, especially in the trade westward from Central Asia. Kushans, whose empire in the early centuries CE straddled key Silk Road territories in Bactria and northern India, also facilitated and profited from the commerce. Later Armenian, Jewish, Arab, and eventually Italian merchants like Marco Polo would join this intricate web of exchange. Caravans were meticulously organized, often consisting of hundreds of camels, the resilient Bactrian camel being the preferred beast of burden, for its ability to withstand harsh desert conditions and carry heavy loads. These caravans moved slowly, covering perhaps 15 to 20 miles a day, the entire journey between the eastern and western termini, often taking many months, if not years, with goods frequently changing hands multiple times along the way. While silk was undoubtedly the most famous commodity traveling westward, giving the entire network its name, the Silk Road was a conduit for a vast array of other goods. From the east, besides voluminous quantities of silk thread and woven textiles, came furs from the northern steppes, fine ceramics, iron, lacquerware, valuable medicinal herbs like rhubarb, and spices such as cinnamon and cassia, often transshipped from Southeast Asia. Traveling eastward from the West and Central Asia, came precious metals like gold and silver, Roman and Sasanian glassware, highly prized in the East, asbestos, coral, pearls, high-quality woolen and linen textiles, wine from Mediterranean vineyards, amber from the Baltic region, and even exotic animals and entertainers. Spices from India and the Spice Islands of Southeast Asia, such as pepper, cloves and nutmeg, also found their way onto segments of the Silk Road, enriching the flow of valuable commodities. Moreover, the routes facilitated the spread of agricultural products, with grapes, alfalfa, pomegranates, and other crops being introduced to new regions. Beyond these tangible goods, the Silk Road served as an extraordinary conduit for the transmission of ideas, religious beliefs, artistic styles, and technological innovations, a process of cultural diffusion that had a profound and lasting impact on all the civilizations it touched. Perhaps the most significant of these intangible exchanges was the spread of major world religions. Buddhism, originating in India, traveled northward and eastward along these routes, carried by monks, missionaries and devout merchants. It took root in Gandhara, a region spanning parts of modern Pakistan and Afghanistan, where it interacted with Hellenistic artistic traditions, giving rise to the Greco-Buddhist art that depicted Buddhas and bodhisattvas with classical features. From Gandhara, Buddhism spread throughout Central Asia, transforming oasis kingdoms like Kucha, Khotan, and Turfan into major centers of Buddhist learning and art, as evidenced by the magnificent cave temple complexes, adorned with vibrant frescoes and sculptures found at sites like Kizil, Bizeklik, most famously the Mogao Caves near Dunhuang. This latter site, a vibrant religious and artistic center for over a millennium, also yielded a hidden library cave, containing tens of thousands of manuscripts, offering an unparalleled glimpse into the diverse religious and secular life along the Silk Road. Nestorian Christianity, a branch of Christianity that had separated from the Western Church over doctrinal differences, also found fertile ground along the Silk Road. Nestorian missionaries and merchants carried their faith eastward from its heartlands, in Persia and Mesopotamia, establishing communities and bishoprics across Central Asia, and even reaching the Tang dynasty capital of Chang'an in China, where a stele erected in 70. Manichaeism, a syncretic religion founded by the Persian prophet Mani in the 3rd century CE, which blended elements of Zoroastrianism, Christianity and Buddhism, also spread widely along these trade routes, becoming for a time a major world religion, with followers from North Africa to China. Zoroastrianism itself, the ancient religion of Persia, maintained a strong presence in its homeland and influenced neighboring regions. Later, from the 7th century onwards, Islam originating in Arabia, spread rapidly across Persia and Central Asia, profoundly transforming the cultural and political landscape of the Silk Road. Muslim merchants became key players in the trade, and Islamic scholarship and art flourished in cities like Samarkand and Bukhara. The exchange of arts and technologies was another crucial aspect of the Silk Road's legacy. Artistic motifs, decorative patterns, and stylistic influences traveled in both directions. Hellenistic realism influenced Buddhist sculpture in Gandhara and Central Asia, while Eastern artistic conventions found their way into Persian and Byzantine art. Musical instruments, dance forms and theatrical traditions were also exchanged. Technologically, the Silk Road was a vital channel for diffusion. The knowledge of papermaking, invented in China, traveled westward, reaching the Islamic world by the 8th century and Europe somewhat later, revolutionizing the dissemination of knowledge. Other technologies believed to have spread along these routes include the secret of silk production itself, eventually smuggled out of China, possibly gunpowder, the horse stirrup, which transformed cavalry warfare, and advancements in metallurgy, glassmaking and agricultural technique. While the precise paths and timelines of these transmissions are often complex and debated by historians, the overall impact of this technological exchange was immense. The fortunes of the Silk Road were inextricably linked to the rise and fall of the great empires that controlled its various segments. Large stable empires, such as the Han dynasty in the east and the Roman Empire in the west during the early centuries of its operation, provided the security and infrastructure necessary for long-distance trade to flourish. The Kushan Empire, which straddled key Central Asian and North Indian territories in the 1st to 3rd century CE, played a vital role as a cultural and commercial intermediary. Sasanian Persia, a major power controlling the western land routes for centuries, both facilitated and sometimes taxed heavily the trade passing through its domain. The Tang dynasty in China, 7th to 9th centuries CE, saw another golden age of Silk Road commerce, with its capital Chang'an becoming one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world. Perhaps the most famous period of resurgence was during the 13th and 14th centuries under the Mongol Empire. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, established by Chinggis Khan and his successors, unified a vast swathe of Eurasia under a single rule, creating unprecedented security for travel and trade across the overland road. It was during this era that European merchants and missionaries, most notably Marco Polo, were able to journey extensively along the Silk Road, bringing back detailed accounts of the East that captivated the European imagination. However, the overland Silk Road eventually declined in prominence. The rise of powerful maritime empires, particularly those of the European Age of Discovery from the 15th century onwards, led to the development of direct sea routes to India, the Spice Islands, and East Asia. These sea routes were often faster, capable of carrying bulk goods more economically, and less subject to the political instabilities and numerous intermediaries of the land routes. The collapse of the Mongol Empire led to renewed political fragmentation and insecurity in Central Asia. The rise of the Ottoman Empire, which controlled the western termini of many land routes, also altered the dynamics of east-west trade. While the overland caravan trade never entirely ceased, it lost its preeminence to the burgeoning maritime commerce. The great oasis cities gradually faded from their central role in world trade, their magnificent ruins later to be rediscovered by explorers and archaeologists. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, European explorers, scholars and adventurers like Sven Hedin, Aurel Stein and Paul Palliot rediscovered many of the lost cities and artistic treasures along the Silk Road, particularly in the remote deserts of the Tarim Basin. Their expeditions unearthed stunning frescoes, sculptures, manuscripts in forgotten languages, and other artifacts that provided invaluable insights into the rich multicultural history of these roads. It was during this period of renewed Western interest that the German geographer, Ferdinand von Richthofen, coined the evocative term, Die Seidenstrasse, or the Silk Road, in 1877, a name that has captured the romantic allure of this ancient network ever since. The legacy of the Silk Road is profound and multifaceted. It was more than just a series of trade routes, it was a dynamic engine of globalization in the pre-modern world, fundamentally shaping the cultures, economies, religions and technologies of the numerous civilizations it connected. It fostered an unprecedented level of interaction and interdependence between diverse peoples across vast distances, demonstrating that even in antiquity, human societies were rarely if ever entirely isolated. The modern world, with its intricate networks of global trade and instantaneous communication, is in many ways a successor to the pioneering spirit of connection embodied by the Silk Road. The quiet rustle of silk, the chime of caravan bells, the murmur of prayers in a dozen different tongues in a bustling oasis bazaar, these are the echoes of a vibrant past, a reminder of the enduring human quest for exchange, understanding and connection across the diverse tapestry of our world.
Okay, I will create a 12th, entirely new historical story piece, meticulously adhering to all VHist Story 1.1 guidelines. The content will be distinct from all previous narratives. Here are the deliverables. 第一部分 LLM 交付成果清单，一份关于本期具体主题的中文内容简要概述，完整的纯粹的可直接流畅诵读的英文视频文案，中文内容简要概述，具体主题沙特尔大教堂的重生，中世纪信仰与记忆的石柱史诗。本期故事将聚焦于法国中世纪哥特式建筑的巅峰之作沙特尔大教堂的建造历程，特别是其在194年毁灭性大火后的重生。我们将追溯一场灾难如何因圣母玛利亚的圣衣 Sanka Camisa 遗物奇迹般幸存，而被诠释为神圣的指令，从而激发了整个社区无与伦比的宗教热情与奉献精神，是要建造一座更为宏伟壮丽的人间天堂。故事将深入探讨哥特式建筑的核心理念，如新柏拉图主义的光明神学与关键技术革新，尖肋拱顶非浮壁，并细致描绘大教堂建造过程中各个环节，从建筑大师的巧妙设计到石匠、木匠、玻璃工匠等行会的精湛技艺，再到普通民众自发参与的推车运动，我们将徜徉于其著名的沙特尔兰彩色玻璃窗所讲述的圣经故事之中，解读其宏伟门楣上雕刻的石像群所蕴含的神学思想，并感受这座历时数十年建成的建筑奇迹如何成为中世纪欧洲的精神中心、朝圣目的地与社会生活的枢纽。通过沙特尔大教堂的建造史诗，我们得以一窥中世纪人们的集体信仰、社区力量，以及他们为表达对神圣的向往而达到的惊人艺术与工程成就。2. English video script, Charturcus Vitero, an epic of faith forged in fire and stone. The rolling plains of Buzzy in northern France stretch for miles, a vast fertile sea of grain, under a wide sky. For centuries, travelers crossing this landscape have been guided by a singular vision on the horizon. Two magnificent yet strikingly dissimilar spires rising above the gentle swell of the earth, heralding the city of Chartur. These spires belong to a cathedral that is more than a mere building. It is a testament, a survivor, a stone and glass embodiment of the spiritual fervor, artistic genius, and communal will of the High Middle Ages. Its story is not one of serene, uninterrupted creation, but a dramatic saga of devastation and rebirth, a narrative that begins in the ashes of a great fire and ascends into the soaring, light-filled vaults of one of the most sublime achievements of Gothic architecture. For centuries, Chartur had been a major pilgrimage site, its renown centered on a precious relic, the Sanka Camisa, a piece of cloth believed to be the very tunic worn by the Virgin Mary during the birth of Christ. This sacred object drew pilgrims from across Europe, making the city prosperous and its Romanesque cathedral a revered center of Marian devotion. But on the night of June 10, 1194, disaster struck. A catastrophic fire, sparked by lightning or accident, raged through the city, consuming the timber-roofed Romanesque cathedral. By morning all that remained of the beloved sanctuary was a smoldering ruin, its stone walls smoke-blackened and structurally compromised. The townspeople were plunged into despair. The loss of their cathedral felt like a sign of divine abandonment, and with it, the presumed destruction of their sacred relic, the heart of their spiritual and economic life. For 3 days the community mourned amidst the ruins, their grief profound. Then from the crypt below the devastated choir, a group of priests emerged, soot-stained but unharmed, carrying the precious reliquary containing the Sanka Camisa. The relic had miraculously survived, protected in the subterranean vault. The papal legate, who was present in church at the time, delivered a powerful sermon, reinterpreting the disaster not as a punishment, but as a divine message. The Virgin Mary, he preached, had allowed her old house to be destroyed, because she desired a new one, more magnificent and more beautiful than any that had come before. This sermon transformed despair into fervent enthusiasm. The survival of the relic was seen as a miracle, a clear sign of Our Lady's favor and her wish for a new beginning. A wave of religious zeal, a collective determination of almost unparalleled intensity, swept through Churchlands and the surrounding region. The people resolved not just to rebuild, but to create a masterpiece worthy of the Queen of Heaven. This outpouring of faith coincided with a profound shift in theological thought and architectural technology that defined the Gothic era. The dark, heavy, thick-walled Romanesque style, with its small windows and rounded arches, was giving way to a new aesthetic of height, light, and structural elegance. Theologians, influenced by Neoplatonic ideas, transmitted through thinkers like Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, began to conceptualize God as divine light, or lux nova. The very structure of a cathedral, therefore, should be designed to capture and transfigure physical light, creating a celestial, otherworldly atmosphere that would elevate the soul of the worshipper towards the divine. This theological vision found its perfect partner in a series of brilliant engineering innovations that allowed builders to dissolve solid walls into shimmering screens of stone and glass. The first of these was the pointed arch. Unlike the semicircular Roman arch, which distributed weight outwards, the pointed arch channeled thrust more directly downwards, allowing for greater height and more flexible floor plans. The second key innovation was the ribbed vault, a skeletal framework of stone arches, or ribs, that supported the thin stone panels of the ceiling. This system concentrated the roof's massive weight onto specific points, rather than along the entire length of the wall. This concentration of force was the crucial development that liberated the walls from their load-bearing function. To counteract the outward thrust generated by these high vaults, Gothic architects developed their most dramatic and iconic feature, the flying buttress. These elegant, arched stone arms reached out from the exterior walls of the upper nave, leaping over the side aisles to connect with massive piers, effectively creating an external skeleton that braced the entire structure. Together, these three elements, the pointed arch, the ribbed vault, and the flying buttress, formed the structural system that made the soaring heights and vast stained glass windows of the Gothic cathedral possible. The rebuilding of Churchyard began with extraordinary speed and a remarkable unity of purpose. Donations poured in from all corners of France, from the king and queen, from noble families, from wealthy merchants, from the canons of the cathedral chapter, and from the ordinary citizens of Churchyards. Guilds of craftsmen, stonemasons, carpenters, blacksmiths, glassmakers, dedicated their skills to the great project. Perhaps most movingly, there are accounts of the cult of the carts, a spontaneous movement where people from all social classes, from nobles to peasants, yoked themselves to heavy carts to haul stone from the quarries several miles away, performing this arduous labor as an act of personal piety and communal devotion. The reconstruction became the single unifying focus of the entire community, a collective offering to God and the Virgin Mary. The design of the new cathedral, attributed to an unknown but brilliant master builder, was revolutionary. It was planned with a geometric and symbolic harmony, intended to be a microcosm of the divine order, a heavenly Jerusalem rendered in stone. The construction was one of the first to be designed from the outset, with flying buttresses as an integral part of the structure, allowing the architect to achieve an unprecedented sense of height and luminosity in the nave. The work proceeded at a remarkable pace. The masons, working with precision and skill, cut and laid the stones, often carving their personal marks onto their finished blocks. The carpenters erected massive wooden scaffolding and frameworks for the vaults. Blacksmiths forged the iron tools and fittings needed for the construction. As the stone skeleton rose, another army of artisans began the work that would give Churchyard its soul, the creation of its stained glass windows. Churchyard is justly famous for retaining an almost complete set of its original medieval glass, a shimmering tapestry of over 150 windows that tell the stories of the Old and New Testaments, the lives of the saints, and the daily work of the guilds who often donated them. The craft of the glassmaker was part science, part alchemy. sand, potash, and lime, were melted at high temperatures. Metallic oxides were added to create the vibrant colors: cobalt for the deep, luminous turquoise blue, copper for ruby red, manganese for purple, iron for yellow. The molten glass was blown, flattened into sheets, and then cut into carefully shaped pieces according to a master design. These pieces were then fitted into a flexible framework of lead strips, or details such as faces and drapery folds, were painted onto the glass with a vitreous enamel, which was then fired in a kiln to fuse it permanently to the surface. The completed panels were then assembled and installed within the stone tracery of the great windows, transforming the interior of the cathedral into a transcendent space where sunlight was no longer ordinary, but was filtered, colored, and imbued with sacred narrative. These windows served as the Bible of the poor, vividly illustrating the stories of faith for a largely illiterate populace. Simultaneously, sculptors were at work creating another kind of stone Bible on the cathedral's exterior. The three great portals are adorned with a complex and magnificent program of sculpture that reflects the theological learning of the school of Chartres, a renowned center of scholarship. The west facade, featuring the royal portal which largely survived the 1194 fire, depicts the life, death, and divine majesty of Christ. The transept portals, created during the Gothic reconstruction, are even more elaborate. The north transept is dedicated to the Old Testament and the Virgin Mary, portraying prophets and saints as precursors to the Christian era. The south transept focuses on the New Testament, depicting the apostles, Christian martyrs, and a dramatic representation of the Last Judgment. These hundreds of sculpted figures, elongated and ethereal, yet with a burgeoning naturalism, are not merely decorative, they form a coherent, theological statement, instructing and inspiring the pilgrims who entered the sacred space. The main period of construction for the new Gothic cathedral was astonishingly short, a testament to the fervent dedication and efficient organization behind the project. The main structure, including the nave, choir, and transepts, was largely complete by around 125, a mere 3 decades after the fire. Raising the massive stone vaults high above the nave floor was a painstaking and dangerous process, requiring immense skill and courage. Installing the vast windows was another delicate operation. Slowly, year by year, the cathedral took shape, its soaring interior reaching towards the heavens, its windows filling the space with an otherworldly glow. Although structurally complete in the 1220s, the final decorations and additions continued for several more years. The cathedral was formally consecrated on October 24, 1260, in a grand ceremony attended by King Louis de Nantes of France and his family. With its completion, Chartres Cathedral became not just a building, but the undisputed heart of medieval life in the region. It was, first and foremost, a house of God, its daily and seasonal rhythms dictated by the cycle of masses, prayers, and religious festivals. It was a major pilgrimage destination, its fame drawing a constant stream of visitors who brought both spiritual vitality and economic prosperity to the city. Its vast interior also served as a community center. Legal matters were sometimes adjudicated within its walls, guilds held their meetings there, and on cold or rainy days, the nave might even serve as a covered marketplace. Inlaid into the floor of the nave is a famous labyrinth, a circular path that pilgrims would follow on their knees, a symbolic journey representing the path to salvation. The survival of Chartres Cathedral through the succeeding centuries is almost as remarkable as its construction. While many French cathedrals suffered greatly during the religious wars and the French Revolution, Chartres was largely spared. During the Revolution, a mob threatened to destroy it, but was reportedly dissuaded by a local citizen, who argued that the immense pile of rubble would block the city's streets for years. Its sculptures were saved from destruction, and while some of its treasures were melted down, the building and its magnificent windows remained largely intact. It also survived the 2 world wars of the 20th century, with its precious stained glass being painstakingly removed and stored for safekeeping during both conflicts. Today, Chartres Cathedral stands as the most complete and best preserved example of high Gothic architecture. It offers a unique window into the medieval worldview, a world where faith was the central organizing principle of life, and where art and engineering were placed in service of the divine. To walk into its nave is to step into another world. The eyes adjust to the cool colored dimness, and the soaring verticals of the piers draw the gaze upwards towards the intricate patterns of the vaults high above. The air is still, heavy with the weight of centuries of prayer and pilgrimage. The light, filtering through the ancient blue, red and gold glass, paints the stone columns with moving patches of color, creating an atmosphere of profound mystery and contemplation. The story of Chartres is an epic of communal endeavor. It demonstrates how a shared belief system could motivate an entire society to undertake a project of immense scale and breathtaking artistry. It was built by thousands of anonymous hands, each contributing their part to a collective vision that none of them would live to see fully completed. The master builders who designed it, the masons who cut the stone, the glaziers who crafted the windows, the carpenters who raised the roof, the patrons who funded it, and the ordinary people who hauled the carts, all were united in a single transcendent purpose. Chartres Cathedral is more than a historical monument, or an architectural textbook. It is a living legacy of a time when people sought to build their highest aspirations into stone and glass. It stands as a testament to the enduring power of faith, to inspire extraordinary acts of creation, the ingenuity of the human mind, to solve immense technical challenges, and the ability of a community to come together to create something of timeless, universal beauty. The two spires, reaching for the heavens above the plains of Buzz, continue to call to us, across the centuries, silent witnesses to the remarkable story of a cathedral that rose from the ashes, to become a sublime and enduring symbol of the human quest for the divine.
The morning of November 1, 1755, dawned clear and cool over Lisbon, the magnificent capital of the Portuguese global empire. It was All Saints' Day, a most solemn religious holiday, and the city's myriad churches, famed for their lavish Baroque decorations and interiors gilded with the immense wealth drawn from Brazil, were filled with worshippers attending Mass. Lisbon was a city of vibrant contradictions. Its harbor on the wide estuary of the Tagus River teemed with ships from every corner of the world, unloading gold, diamonds, sugar and spices, making it one of the richest and most important ports in Europe. Yet beyond its bustling waterfront, its heart remained a labyrinth of narrow, winding medieval streets, a dense warren of tall, ancient houses. It was a city of profound piety, where the authority of the Catholic Church and the watchful eye of the Inquisition were ever present. A city that lived confidently under the gaze of a benevolent God. In the quiet solemnity of that All Saints' morning, no one could have conceived that within a matter of hours, their world, both physical and philosophical, would be irrevocably shattered. At approximately 9:40 in the morning, a low, ominous rumble began to emanate from deep within the earth. It grew rapidly into a violent tremor, then a calamitous upheaval. For several terrifying minutes, the ground beneath Lisbon heaved and convulsed with an unimaginable force. Stone buildings swayed like reeds in a storm. The vaulted ceilings of the great churches, filled with the faithful, cracked and then collapsed, raining down tons of masonry upon the horrified congregations below. Palaces, libraries, convents and humble homes alike were twisted, fractured, and reduced to rubble. Fissures, some 15 feet wide, ripped open in the city streets, swallowing people and carriages. A thick cloud of dust rose from the ruins, choking the air and obscuring the sun, plunging the city into a terrifying twilight. This was the first shock of what modern seismologists estimate to have been an earthquake with a magnitude of between 8.5 and 9, one of the most powerful in recorded history. As the initial prolonged shaking subsided, the dazed and bleeding survivors who had managed to escape the collapsing structures stumbled into the open spaces of the city squares and, most numerously, towards the wide-open waterfront of the Tagus, believing it to be the safest place from falling debris. There they witnessed a second, equally terrifying phenomenon. The sea itself seemed to withdraw from the harbor, exposing the riverbed, littered with lost cargo and ancient shipwrecks. Some, driven by a strange curiosity or desperation, ventured onto the newly exposed ground. Then, after what seemed an eternity, the water returned, not as a gentle tide, but as a series of colossal tsunamis. A wall of water perhaps 30 feet high or more surged up the Tagus, engulfing the harbor and the lower parts of the city. It swept away thousands of people who had sought refuge on the waterfront, smashing ships against the shore and inundating the ruins near the river. But the city's ordeal was far from over. A third and even more persistent destroyer was now unleashed. The countless candles that had been lit for the All Saints' Day services in the city's hundreds of churches and chapels had been overturned during the earthquake, igniting tapestries, vestments, and wooden altars. Small fires began to break out all across the ruined city. In the narrow streets, choked with timber and debris, these fires quickly merged, fanned by the day's winds, into a raging firestorm. The conflagration burned uncontrollably for 5, some say 6 days, consuming what the earthquake and tsunami had. It incinerated priceless libraries, including the Royal Archives with their irreplaceable records of Portugal's voyages of discovery, magnificent art collections, and the homes of rich and poor alike. The heat was so intense, it was said to have melted church bells and silver plate. Lisbon, the proud queen of the sea, was transformed into a smoldering, apocalyptic wasteland. In the immediate aftermath, social order disintegrated. The city was left without effective governance, its royal family having survived by chance, as they were at their country palace in Belém, outside the main disaster zone. Survivors roamed the ruins in a state of shock, desperate for food, water and shelter. Amidst the chaos, bands of looters, some of them escaped convicts, began to pillage the wrecked homes and palaces. It was in this moment of profound crisis that one man, Sebastião José de Carvalho e Melo,
the king's chief minister and the future Marquis de Pombal, stepped forward with extraordinary energy and ruthless pragmatism. While others were paralyzed by despair or engaged in theological hand-wringing, Pombal took decisive control. His immediate orders were famously direct and unsentimental: bury the dead and heal the living. He organized impromptu tribunals to summarily try and execute looters, their bodies left hanging from gallows as a grim warning. He dispatched soldiers to maintain order and prevent the spread of disease, by disposing of the tens of thousands of corpses. He requisitioned food supplies from surrounding regions, and implemented strict price controls to prevent hoarding and starvation. Pombal's swift and often brutal actions imposed a semblance of order on the chaos, preventing a secondary catastrophe of famine and plague, and firmly established his authority as the de facto ruler of the recovery effort. As news of the Lisbon disaster spread across Europe, it provoked not just sympathy, but a profound intellectual and philosophical crisis. The earthquake struck at the very heart of the Enlightenment's prevailing mood of philosophical optimism, most famously articulated by the German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, whose doctrine held that a rational and benevolent God had created the best of all possible worlds. The sheer scale of death and suffering in Lisbon, a deeply pious city, on a major holy day, seemed to mock this idea. How could a good and all-powerful God permit such indiscriminate horror? This question was taken up with particular force by the French philosopher Voltaire. Deeply shaken by the event, he penned his powerful poem on the Lisbon disaster, directly attacking the optimistic philosophy that he saw as an empty and insulting response to real human suffering. He famously wrote, "Come ye philosophers, who cry, all is well, and contemplate this ruin of a world." This philosophical struggle found its most enduring expression in his satirical masterpiece, Candide, or Optimism, published in the novel. The protagonist Candide and his tutor, Pangloss, a caricature of a Leibnizian optimist, experience the Lisbon earthquake firsthand. As the city crumbles around them, Pangloss calmly attempts to prove that it is all for the best in the best of all possible worlds. Voltaire's biting satire exposed the inadequacy of abstract philosophical systems in the face of raw, brutal reality, and helped to shift the intellectual climate away from facile optimism towards a more skeptical, empirical and human-centered world. The Swiss philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, in a famous letter to Voltaire, offered a different perspective, arguing that the disaster was not a mark against providence or nature, but a consequence of human folly, our decision to abandon a more natural state and congregate in poorly constructed cities had made us vulnerable. The debate sparked by Lisbon marked a critical moment in Enlightenment thought, accelerating the move away from purely theological explanations for natural phenomena towards rational and scientific inquiry. This shift towards scientific understanding was actively, if inadvertently, promoted by Pombal himself. In an effort to understand the event, he ordered a systematic inquiry to be conducted throughout Portugal. A detailed questionnaire was sent to every parish priest in the country, asking for precise information. At what time did the earthquake begin? How long did it last? In which direction did the ground seem to move? What damage was done to buildings? How did animals behave? What happened to the wells and springs? The responses to this survey, which are still preserved in the Portuguese National Archives, represent one of the first coordinated scientific studies of an earthquake, providing invaluable data for future researchers and marking a foundational moment in the history of seismology and earth science. For Pombal, the earthquake was more than a disaster to be managed. It was an unparalleled opportunity. He used the crisis to centralize power and to enact a radical modernization of the Portuguese state, breaking the influence of his political rival. The old, powerful aristocratic families, many of whom had been the staunchest opponents of his centralizing reforms, were quite literally ruined, their grand palaces in Lisbon destroyed, and their wealth diminished. Pombal systematically sidelined them from positions of power. More significantly, he used the post-earthquake climate of fear and suspicion to move against his most powerful institutional rival, the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, accusing them of inciting public unrest, and implicating them in a later alleged assassination attempt on the king. He launched a ruthless campaign against the order, eventually expelling them from Portugal and all its colonies in 1759, a move that sent shockwaves through Catholic Europe and consolidated his own immense power. Beyond the political purges, Pombal's most visible and enduring legacy was the complete rebuilding of Lisbon's devastated downtown district. The Baisha, instead of attempting to replicate the old city's chaotic medieval layout, he and his military engineers envisioned a completely new city, built on modern principles of order, rationality and safety. The Baisha was reconstructed on a strict rectilinear grid plan, with wide, airy streets, and elegant, uniform squares. The buildings themselves were a marvel of innovative design. Pombal decreed a standardized neoclassical style, creating a sense of harmony and order. More importantly, these buildings were designed to be earthquake-resistant. They incorporated a flexible internal wooden framework, known as the Pombalan cage, within their masonry walls. This cage-like structure was designed to sway and distribute the seismic forces during an earthquake, preventing the kind of catastrophic collapse that had destroyed the old city. This was one of the earliest examples of large-scale, standardized anti-seismic construction in the world, a direct and pragmatic response to the trauma of the new city, with its grand commercial square, the Praça do Comércio, opening onto the Tagus, was a monument to Enlightenment ideals of logic, commerce, and state power. The Lisbon earthquake of 1755 was a pivotal event in European history, a moment when the ground trembled, and the very foundations of thought and society shifted. It was a human tragedy of immense proportions, claiming tens of thousands of lives, and destroying one of the world's great cities. But from its rubble rose a new Lisbon, a city physically and conceptually remade. It triggered a profound intellectual reckoning that challenged prevailing views on God, nature and humanity, helping to shape the course of the Enlightenment. It provided the impetus for the first scientific investigations into earthquakes, laying the groundwork for a new field of science, and it acted as the catalyst for a political revolution, enabling an iron-willed minister to consolidate power and force a feudal, tradition-bound kingdom onto the path of modernity. The city of Lisbon today still bears the deep imprint of that single cataclysmic day. The elegant grid of the Baixa district stands in marked contrast to the surviving older, winding streets of the Alfama neighborhood. The story of the earthquake is woven into the city's identity, a constant reminder of nature's awesome power and humanity's remarkable capacity for resilience, innovation and renewal. It was a catastrophe that not only destroyed a city, but also helped to construct a new world of ideas, a moment when a tremor in the earth sent a shockwave through the very consciousness of an age, forcing it to confront the unpredictable, to question the unquestionable, and to rebuild its world on more modern, more rational and perhaps more durable foundation.